Which class is picked the most in TF2, and which class is mained the most in TF2? And does my thumbnail kinda give it away? All this and more, let's jump into it, smash like button. When you think of classes that are popular in TF2 pubs, this horrific image probably comes to mind. It feels to me like in every game of TF2 there are at least 3 spies and 3 snipers and about -3 medics. I don't know how that's possible either. We get it, spy and sniper are fun to play, but there are 7 other equally enjoyable classes to choose from. Okay, maybe 6. 5? Anyway, before I made this video, I was genuinely interested in this question, and I would have assumed that Spy and Sniper were the most picked classes in TF2 pubs by a pretty large margin, with Medic coming in last. But then I did some science. But before I tell you my results, why don't you pop a little guess in the comments section below? Who do you think's the most picked, the least picked, and everything in between? And remember, no cheating, because if you cheat, you're only cheating yourself, okay? Good. Now my guess wasn't too far off, but there were definitely some results I found really surprising. Before we go into the detail, and because I know you can't wait another moment because you're exploding with anticipation, these were the top 3 classes picked in pubs based on my data. Now I'm sure many of you would have guessed something along these lines. It's fairly obvious that Soldier is a very popular class, he's enjoyable to play, he's effective, and he has a pretty high skill ceiling to keep you busy with. But I certainly didn't expect him to be the most popular class, especially above Spy and Sniper. But maybe you did. Let me know in the comments below. So next up, I want to show you where all the other classes placed and how things change when we look purely at games of attack versus games of defense. There are timestamps below if you want to jump to a section, but before we do that, I wanted to use this part of the video to explain how I got these results. So first of all, I looked around online to see if I could find any existing data on this question, but the only real thing I could find was an old article from the Guinness World Records in 2011 that stated that Engineer was the most picked class, getting 15% of picks. Now I assume this was accurate at the time, but the game has changed quite a lot since then. I also found several polls and surveys online, but most of these focused on what people mained as opposed to what they actually picked. And while there will be a big crossover between these 2 stats, they are not quite the same thing. And on top of this, most of these polls would have been put together by content creators such as myself, known for playing a particular class, and so they will likely be biased towards that class. But obviously I had to create my own poll because how could I resist? And lo and behold, the entire TF2 community's most popular main is Demo Man. Nothing to do with me being a demo main, I promise you. So this isn't what we're going to focus on today, although I was surprised at how many medic mains there seem to be out there, being the 4th most mained class. Based on this poll alone, of course, and somehow Spy and Sniper being right at the bottom of the list there, it's very bizarre, and this does not correlate with the results we're going to look at in just a second. So anyway, it didn't really look like this question had been answered properly already, but if you do know of any resources that I haven't found, please let me know. So I thought nothing beats a good piece of old-fashioned, hard, juicy data. And because I'm dumb, the only way I knew how to get this data was with a good old-fashioned pen and paper. And when I say pen and paper, of course I mean Excel spreadsheet and fingers. So this was my method. I recorded the team compositions of 200 games of casual TF2. Correct, I do not have a life. I recorded the amount of each class we had on my team and if we were attacking or defending. I chose a single game mode to focus on, although I did not choose a single map. The rules were that the team had to be full or very nearly full, and the measurement was taken near the start of the round. Of course, I'm aware that the pick rates could change over the course of a game. For example, more NGs at the beginning of a game, and if I had more time and resources, I would love to be able to, for example, record the team composition periodically throughout a game, say every minute, and do this for like 10,000 games. But I had to draw the line somewhere for my sanity. However, I'm pretty confident that these results are indicative of the bigger picture. I did take a look into statistical significance, and depending on what you think the total player base of TF2 is, some will of course tell you it's less than what's shown on the Steam charts because of bot accounts and stuff like that. But depending on what you think the total player base is, then 200 data points gets fairly close to what is needed for an accurate representation, with of course a margin of error, but as I'm hoping you will agree, these results look realistic to me and intuitively feel right. So, based on 200 games of TF2, Soldier was picked the most frequently, just closely followed by Sniper and then Spy, and then Pyro. But poor Heavy seems to be the least picked class, even on payload, where I thought he would be a very popular pick. That's right, you heard it here first. Heavy is dead. Heavy is dead! Okay, stop it. One of the findings that I wasn't expecting is that Medic sits comfortably in the middle of the table along with Engineer, Demoman and Scout. I really thought Medic would be a lot lower than this, and frankly the least picked class. But this kind of coincides with the findings from my poll earlier. Apparently people do play Medic. Another way of visualizing this information is by splitting this into 3 tiers or groups, so it's very easy to see here which classes get picked a ton, which sit in the middle, and which classes, for some reason, nobody seems to pick. So some of the other things that surprised me, Scout doesn't seem to be as popular as I thought he would be. I definitely thought he'd be in the top 3 or 4, but perhaps this would be the case if we looked at another game mode. Sniper is more popular than Spy. Watch the fudge. Is that just me who thought Spy was going to be like right at the top? Imagine if I did this recording on 2 Fort. I can't even imagine what that figure would be for Sniper. It makes me shudder. And finally, I was a little bit surprised to see that Pyro is super popular. He is commonly thought of as being quite weak, but people seem to enjoy playing him and he's picked a decent amount. So next up, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at these results and see how they change when we focus on just the games of attack versus the games of defense. There are of course some classes that are innately more defense orientated, and so I would expect to see some movement on the graph. So here's a side-by-side comparison, and these are some of the key differences that I spotted. Scout seems to be much more popular on attack, which kind of makes sense. Demoman and Engineer are way more popular on defense, understandably, although Sniper is also a little bit more popular on defense. Soldier is quite a lot less popular on defense, which definitely surprised me a little bit. And finally, Heavy is even less popular on defense. Now this could be because he's slow to get back to the front lines, I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes the reasoning behind these changes are obvious, but sometimes it's less the case. So if you guys have any ideas or spot anything I haven't, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. One thing worth noting here is that, of course, on the class selection screen, all of the characters are grouped into attack, defense and support. Now this wouldn't have much effect on the more experienced players, but may have some influence on players who are more new to the game. Generally speaking, in terms of pick rates in pubs, the balance in TF2 is pretty good really. Now I can hear the steam coming out of your ears in rage, but I'm not talking about effectiveness, just what gets played in pubs. And I imagine this would closely represent what people enjoy playing the most too. And when we compare this to a game like Overwatch, where pick rates vary way more drastically, I think TF2 does a pretty decent job. Of course, granted, Overwatch has a much bigger challenge in that there are way more heroes to balance in the first place. On a side note, I'm super jealous of the stats available to Overwatch players. It's so awesome how you can break down not only the pick rate and the win rate, but also how things change for each rank and so much more. It's just freaking heckin' awesome. One part of the story that all this data does not tell you is that when I was recording this, I noticed that the team composition and pick rates fluctuated a lot. You would go from a game that was very neatly balanced with a nice team composition to another game with 8 spies and 4 soldiers. And this was especially the case, I found, for Spy and possibly Sniper, which would go from like 4 to 0 all the time. Whereas I would imagine a class like Soldier gets that first place simply because he is so consistently picked. And this is because he's just such a great generalist class that suits any situation, and I think can be great fun to play and be effective with even if you're not that great at the game. If I was to look at other game modes, I would expect some classes to rise and fall, for example Engineer being more prevalent in attack and defense, and there being more scouts on control point maps. But Soldier, I think he'll be picked the most, whatever the game mode. But why then does it always feel like we have 8 spies, but I never noticed that we have too many soldiers? Well, I think this is down to 2 things: confirmation bias and negativity bias. I personally believe we always seem to have 8 spies, so whenever I spot that, I kind of acknowledge it more. And it's annoying when this happens, so it leaves more of a mark on my mind than say when we have 4 soldiers, which doesn't actually bother me that much. A little bit of psychology there, why the heck not? But maybe for you guys it's obvious that there are loads of soldiers out there, and again I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments below. I would have loved to explore other ways to split the data, looking at different game modes, different maps, wins versus losses. You could even look at different regions. Is Heavy more popular in Russia? Don't know. Is that racist? Probably. Is the Soldier more popular in the US? Maybe. And there would be so much cool stuff you could do if you did have a lot more data. For example, you could see the correlation between, the spy quantity and how many games you lose. I'm not bitter. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Before we finish up, a few quick thank yous. Thank you to the grizzled Vietnam war veteran for the strange killstreak bottle. Cure Legs, formerly known as Sxottie, I believe that guy is, for the Clan Pride medal. To Mr. T, because I can't pronounce his name, for an insane amount of items, including loads of penguins, obviously, a beautiful iron bomber, and an Australian sticky bomb launcher, absolutely insane. Thank you to Bombini for the Sub-Zero suit, Scott for the metal and the sneaky spats of sneaking, and finally thank you to your boy for the Medic Mech bag, Citizen Kane. I think that was everything. Make sure to tune into my streams, follow me on Twitter, become a Patreon. Thank you to all the patrons I have already. I really appreciate your support, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Really? Oh my god! Jesus Christ! I'm so glad I didn't disconnect before seeing that. I'm gonna have to save that. Wait a second, F10.